Welcome to the Tune Under podcast, the only dedicated Newcastle United podcast in the Southern Hemisphere. I am Jack, as usual, and we do have a guest to introduce in a minute. But first of all, we say hello to Bobby in a pretty cold Ballarat. How you doing, Bobby?
Yeah, I'm freezing. Absolutely freezing. It's nice and 4 degrees here at the moment. Feels like minus 2.3 degrees. So, yeah, I've got a blanket on underneath because it is, even with the heater on, it's still not getting through. So, very cold, but very excited. I'm a massive fan of our guest. I'm a religious listener to his podcast. So, yeah, very pumped for today's episode.
Yeah, welcome to the Tune Under podcast, the Price of Football author. I'm basically the general go-to man for any kind of football finance. He does a lot of media work all over the place. Expert in football finance, Mr. Kieran Maguire. How you doing, Kieran?
I'm grand, thanks, lads. Football season's finished, and I don't know about you. I'm bored. What are we going to do? I mean, football finance doesn't stop. It is 24/7, but I'm just desperate for the fixtures to come out and to start planning my life for the next 10 months. Which I'd imagine if you're a Newcastle fan, you're even keener because this is going to be, I think, the first season where we see the afterburners put on.
I'll tell you what we're doing, Kieran. We're sleeping. We're catching up on sleep. Instead of watching games at 2, 3 in the morning, we're actually got the ability to get some shut-eye. So whilst I can't wait for the next season to come, I'm glad that I can actually sleep at night.
Yeah, we started the podcast in November time, so after the takeover. But yeah, the 6 of us, we obviously have to be up through the night watching the football, and then things happen in the middle of the night. So you might be in bed scrolling through Twitter just before you go to sleep, and then something happens and you get wired and you can't go to sleep and you have to scroll through Twitter all night. That's the way it is, isn't it, Bobby?
The joys of being an English Premier League fan in Australia. So wouldn't change it for the world.
It's definitely been worth it over the last few months for us. So plenty more where that comes from, hopefully. But Kieran, I heard you talking on one of your podcasts about the fact that your wife watches Married at First Sight Australia.
Oh, yes.
What do you think of that iconic Aussie cultural delight? You probably don't watch it, do you?
Sometimes I happen to be sitting in the room, and she will start talking to me about these people as if they're friends of the family, and I'm going, I just don't want to engage with this. It is vacuous garbage. It is there just to occupy, and I know it does it very successful. And we're about to start. I mean, we have it here in the UK, but it doesn't seem to have taken off to the same extent. We're about to start Love Island, which I would imagine is quite similar. And incredibly painful, but she loves it.
Yeah, I saw that Michael Owen's daughter is going to be on Love Island, which makes I'm only 36 now, and it makes me feel extremely old.
Yes.
All right. We will be back just after a very short break, and we'll get straight into the football and the Newcastle. All right, so Kieran, Newcastle fans really haven't needed to worry too much about financial fair play up until this point, but all of a sudden it's really become a hot topic with the takeover and with newspaper reports of linking us with everybody under the sun and all that sort of stuff. But let's just start at the beginning with financial fair play. Whose idea was it, and what is it for, financial fair play?
It was originally the idea of Michel Platini and Arsène Wenger. I think they were two of the leading advocates, and it was introduced by UEFA in respect of European football in 2013, and the Premier League followed suit quite quickly afterwards. Initially, it was there to try to reduce the level of debt in European football, but debt is money that you owe that has to be repaid. And the clubs that they were targeting were clubs such as Chelsea, Manchester City, PSG. And in the case of City and PSG, they don't owe a bean because the owners had put money in through shares rather than loans. So when they realised that, and the pressure was coming from what you might call the aristocracy, the established elite of European football, the likes of Real Madrid and Bayern Munich and Liverpool, Manchester United, because they didn't want competition. And this is the ultimate driver of FFP, despite what they might claim to say otherwise. So therefore, they moved on to a new model of financial fair play, which is a break-even model, and it's effectively your revenues less your costs. So that's where we are at present with regards to it.
Yeah. And the EPL, you said that the EPL followed suit. So did they adopt all of the same, like exactly the same rules with regards to financial fair play, and then put that in place as a blanket rule for the Premier League clubs?
It's very similar. I think one of the differences is that under UEFA rules, clubs cannot sell their stadiums and book the profits and offset them against your financial fair play losses. But the Premier League does allow clubs to do that. And the numbers involved are different. Under UEFA's rules, you're allowed to lose 30 million euro over a rolling 3-year period, and in the Premier League it's 105 million. But the broad concept is the same. UEFA are going to tweak it again, I think, in 2023 to try to address some other issues. But to a certain extent, they're playing whack-a-mole, because every time they change the rules, there's always, you know, I'm for people that don't know me, I'm a teacher, and yeah, if ever you've studied or taught law, the first thing you say on day one is just remember, folks, for every rule there's a loophole. And you just got to be smarter than the people making the rules to come up to spot those loopholes. Or you let them make the rules and then you recruit the people who made the rules, because they will certainly know where the weaknesses lie. So that's where we are today. The numbers are slightly different, but the broad principles are very, very close to one another if we compare UEFA to the Premier League.
And it didn't really work to stop Chelsea and Man City from getting into the club, did it? Because Chelsea have won 2 Champions Leagues, City have been in a final and are in the latter stages every time. How do they is that why they're changing things now, or how do they go about that now that those clubs are established?
Well, the rules were introduced after it's a classic case of closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. So Abramovich acquired Chelsea in 2003. Sheikh Mansour acquired Manchester City in 2008. The FFP rules, or they're now called profitability and sustainability rules by the Premier League, which is odd because they don't encourage either profitability or sustainability. But the rules effectively came into play in 2013. So it will make it more difficult for clubs such as Liverpool, who have have investors who are willing to put in large sums into the club, to spend to the same extent as we've seen with City and Chelsea. The whole aim of FFP is to stop another Chelsea or City, rather than to address those clubs themselves.
And one of the criticisms of it is that word fair, isn't it? Because there never was any intention of fairness or any kind of leveling of the playing field. Like you said, it was more about shutting clubs out than leveling things and equaling things up.
You're absolutely right. And it's not often I say anything pleasant or positive about UEFA, especially after the debacle of the Champions League final a few days ago. I work in the city of Liverpool. I share an office with a colleague who's a season ticket holder at Anfield. It doesn't matter which team you support. No fans deserve to be treated like that. But as far as the rules were concerned, UEFA have said what happens on the pitch is an irrelevance. The aim is not to have competitive football. It's to have a status quo. It's to have a cartel at the top of football, which can guarantee or almost guarantee participation and trophies year in, year out. If we take a look at the Champions League and the countries that have provided the winners over the last decade, in fact, even if you look at the cities that have provided the winners, there's fewer and fewer of them I'm old enough to remember Porto, Steaua Bucharest, Ajax of the Netherlands, Nottingham Forest, Villa, Celtic, going back to Celtic, and that used to be one of the great things because it was a genuine European competition. It's no longer that, and that is due to UEFA. The clubs that have been very successful have been very good at generating money and spending that money. But we are narrowing the field, and more competition is the last thing that they want.
And every time that there's changes to the Champions League, this time it was in response to the Super League, wasn't it? Or they might have already been preparing for these changes. But the thing about the coefficient just means that clubs that didn't even qualify, a couple of clubs still might get into the Champions League. So every time this happens, it just seems it's narrowing down again and again, isn't it? So there's not even any kind of hiding about this, is it? This is what they're doing.
Yeah, it's very blatant. I mean, the only good thing that has come about is that the very latest incarnation of the Champions League, I think, will benefit Newcastle United. And the reason why I say that is there's going to be an additional 4 places in the Champions League, of which 2 will go to either new countries or will be depending upon if you've presently got 3 clubs, you could possibly get 4. So that is a positive. The other 2 clubs go to the countries whose clubs performed best in Europe the previous season. If we take a look at that over the course of the last 10 years, it's almost certainly to be England and one of Germany or Spain. If Newcastle fans are thinking it's going to be tough trying to break into the top 4 because 6 into 4 doesn't go, and we've got the greedy 6 there already. So 7 into 4 is going to go more difficult. I think realistically it's going to be 7 into 5, and potentially because the Europa League winners automatically qualify for the Champions League, we could have 6 Premier League clubs appearing in the competition.
So what you're saying is us Newcastle fans have to keep cheering Man City and Liverpool to keep doing what they're doing in Europe.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the paradox, because I was working in Seville in Spain 2 weeks ago. I was doing some filming there for something or other, which is great. Somebody asked you to go to Spain for a week of filming. you don't ask any details. And I'd managed to get a ticket for the Europa League final between Frankfurt and Rangers. And it was a fantastic meeting of fans. 99.99% of them got on really well. But it was really gutting having to listen to them say, well, actually, we know that Celtic doing well in Europe has helped us to potentially get into the Champions League next season. Through the qualification route, and those 2 sets of fans hate each other's guts. So this is very strange paradox that Newcastle United potentially will have benefited from Liverpool getting to the final, Chelsea getting to the quarterfinals, Manchester City getting to the semi-finals, because that helps that country coefficient, which is probably going to secure an additional place each season.
So, in simple terms, what's the impact been of financial fair play? That's obviously a very big question, but simply, kind of, how can you narrow that down to a couple of points for what the impact has been over the last 8 or 9 years since it was introduced?
Well, what we have seen is a deceleration of spending by Chelsea and Manchester City. When Abramovich first came in, he accelerated the Chelsea wage bill. They won the Premier League in the first 2 years under Mourinho, with Abramovich's wealth behind them, and I think it changed football in the sense that we've always secretly known that money counts. Well, this was proof of it. If you start spending incredible sums of money, you can blow the other clubs out of the water. And the owners of Manchester City saw that, and they said, well, if Abramovich can do it, Can we do it as well? And it took a little bit longer but then they were coming from a much lower base. I mean, Chelsea, remember, were fourth when Abramovich acquired them. Manchester City, they weren't serious contenders. So what has happened since the introduction of financial fair play is that the level of spending by those two clubs is now broadly in line with that of Manchester United. So, if we take a look at the spending since 2013, there has been more measured spending. They're still top. They're all top three when it comes to wages and transfer spend and so on. So that has been a consequence. And it has also made it more difficult for other clubs. So before Newcastle United were acquired by PIF, we have Aston Villa being bought by Wes Edens and Naz Sawaris. Sawaris is the richest man in Egypt. Wes Edens is a multi-billionaire in the States. Can they spend unlimited amounts of money? No. So we are seeing clubs having to think their way through the challenges. And also, we've seen some clubs with rich owners try to use smart accountants and lawyers to get around the system as well.
I think Manchester City and Chelsea, I think I read that in their first 5 years of their ownerships, they both lost in excess of £500 million each over that period of time. So that's just, demonstrates what you've said about those clubs, those owners just pumping cash and cash and cash in, isn't it? And that's definitely something that you can't do now anymore, isn't it? But is that something that's even desirable to do for clubs now, no matter how rich your owners are?
Well, it all depends upon the objectives of the owners. If I am a multi-billionaire, then spending £500 million on a pet project, what else am I going to do with the money? I can. I've got a couple of apartments in Monaco and New York and Paris. I've got a yacht or two. I've got a supermodel wife and probably a couple of supermodel mistresses as well. And I've still got ludicrous amounts of money. What better way than to get the recognition that only being a Premier League club owner brings? Because if you were to ask 100 people in this country, name a Russian oligarch, well, who's going to be number one? People say, Abramovich, and who's the second one going to be? And they'll be, I don't really know. So it does bring fame, and I think it could be argued, and I don't necessarily. This might sound. Apologies if this sounds like a bad joke, but especially in the present time. It also means that from Abramovich's point of view, the fame that it brings him means that he doesn't end up waking up dead in a bath, or rather not waking up, but dead in a bath, because Putin is a mafia leader. I used to teach in Russia. I'm aware of the way that the country is run, and he's paranoid, and we've seen people killed on behalf of his orders. Well, the extra level of fame that being a Premier League club owner brings does actually help to keep you alive, and that's it's a terribly cynical thing to say, but I stand by it.
Well, as Newcastle fans as well, like, we're probably going a little bit off topic, but there's obviously been all of the thing about sports washing and all that sort of stuff, and all of a sudden we're having to become kind of informed on geopolitics. Like all I did was be born and then be born in that area and support Newcastle. All Bobby did was choose to support Newcastle. So it's like, what you've said there, but it is about geopolitics, isn't it? And it's football. That's what football is now, with the amount of money in and the people who are involved. I think that's something that's inescapable now, isn't it?
Yes, and critics and rivals will always find any means to criticize the club. You can be unhappy with the human rights record of Saudi Arabia. You can disagree with the the rights of women and gay people and so on, and still support Newcastle United. So as soon as you start to dig deep into any club, you find nobody comes out of it particularly well. So I support Brighton Hove Albion. We are owned by a local lad who's been extremely successful, who's become a billionaire, but he's involved in the gambling industry. So do I have? If other fans want to say, well, you look at. I was tweeting this morning about somebody who tragically took their own life following gambling addiction. Does that mean that I'm complicit in that? I don't think it is. I mean, you can do this to effectively any product. If I buy an iPhone, am I complicit to what's happening in terms of where are the raw materials for that coming from? Are they being assembled in sweatshops? It's exactly the same when I buy my Nike sneakers and so on. None of us are completely innocent of all this, but it doesn't mean that we're guilty of anything either. We consumers. Why do we love football? Because football's a form of escapism, and life is pretty grim at present, and football is a vehicle through which we can do things that we can't do in any other aspect of life. I cannot recall I'm a 60-year-old bloke. I've never hugged strangers in my life apart from when I'm at football matches.
Yeah.
So and that's something we should celebrate.
Yeah, well said.
So they're replacing financial fair play with a new system, something to do with squad cost, isn't it? So what exactly is the new system, and what do you think the impact of that will be, or we're going to have to wait 5-10 years to know that?
Well, the existing system says that your revenues, which is effectively broadcast income, ticket sales and commercial income, less your day-to-day costs of running the club, under UEFA rules, they cannot exceed 35 million, or 30 million euro. Under the new rules, that's going to be extended to 60 million euro. But there's going to be some adjustments for which cost you can include. In addition, you've got to be able to prove that you are up to date with your payments to other clubs for transfer fees. That's not going to be an issue at Newcastle. And the third issue is that player wages plus transfer fee amortization plus agent fees cannot exceed, I think it's going to be 70% of your revenue. So those clubs like Real Madrid and Manchester United, which have huge revenues, are automatically going to be able to spend more money. So it is once again, it is locking in the advantages that the elite clubs have, because they don't want Newcastle to be challenging, and that's not. They don't want Aston Villa to be challenging. If somebody comes in and buys a Romanian team, they don't want that Romanian team to be challenging either. So it's all geared towards protection of the elite.
Why have they made the change then from the current guise of financial fair play?
I think they realised that with the failure of the charges against Manchester City and PSG, that the existing rules perhaps weren't fit for purpose. There is a belief also that the football players are the bad guys in football. If we take a look at the proposals under Super League, the proposals were such that I think clubs will be limited to 55% of revenues going to players, and people say, well, that's really good. That's really good for the game. I said, well, that simply means that there's more money going to the owners. So what you're doing is you're transferring money to billionaires. Just and I'm not saying it's wrong, but explain to me how by giving more money to billionaires that's good for the game as a whole. And once you start to realise where these decisions are coming from, I mean, the Super League was a complete debacle, and it was it was arrogance. And a complete lack of understanding by the decision makers in the game, and the more that you dug into it, I mean, the European Super League website is still there, and the statements from Joel Glazer are still up there. It's like a ghost ship.
I think Florentino Perez has doubled down, hasn't he? He keeps talking about, and was it Juventus as well, who were not giving it up? They were going to keep going for it.
Yeah. There's three clubs, that Juve, Barca, and Real Madrid. And it has to be said that Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, all of those other clubs are still shareholders in the European Super League company. It's not dead. It's just resting.
It's scary, isn't it? Like the language from these clubs is still pointing to something like this potentially happening in the future.
Yeah. You live in you work in Liverpool, Kieran. And we were talking about the Fenway Sports Group. They've got a bit of a record, haven't they, of doing things and then tracking back in the face of extreme public displeasure. They did it through COVID with the furlough scheme as well, and they did it with this. But can you trust any group football owners, really? How do the fans know they're not going to try and do something like this again?
Well, I mean, they have given a commitment to not try it again. I think they got such a bloody nose. I think what we should try to do as fans is to be organised, to be reasonable as well, to be able to articulate why things are wrong. And Liverpool fans are extremely good at that. That they've got organisations such as the Spirit of Shankly and the Anfield Rap, who leverage on the success and the popularity of Liverpool, and fair play to them. The Anfield Rap, I know the guys there. They've got 12 full-time members of staff. That's great. Yeah, that's providing jobs in Liverpool as far as I'm concerned. So I've got huge amounts of time for them. But what they are not is stupid. And football club owners and many people in the media consider us as fans to be stupid, and that actually gives us an advantage because football fans are not people that are going to drink 12 pints of lager and pick a fight. Football fans, there are lawyers and accountants and doctors and brain surgeons and vets and people who are working on the shop floor, all of whom have got a huge range of skills and knowledge, which together can stand up for the rights of the fans. So what should arise if the government keeps its word, and with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, that's not always the case, is that we should be heading for some form of football regulator, which is there to protect the interests of fans, because as we saw in Paris on Saturday night with the events there, that we are still perceived to be animals, and treated accordingly.
Yeah, and we've got 14 years of experience of being treated as if we're stupid by our previous owner, who just treated us with complete and utter contempt for the majority of his time at Newcastle. So we will actually touch on him a little bit in a bit. But just before we get onto Newcastle, I just wanted to ask, this thing with Mbappe has obviously been in the news lately. So there's a shift. There seems to be a shift from sort of clubs having power over players a bit towards the other way, where players are kind of signing less lengthy contracts and they're getting a lot more financial benefit from that. Do you think this has come about because the players get paid so much now that they don't have to rely on long contracts? So if they're not worried about getting injured and not getting paid, do you think that's to do with that? And do you think this is sustainable? And do you think this is desirable, this switch towards player power from the clubs having all the control? Clubs are owned by billionaires.
I'm sort of old school. The vast majority of footballers come from working class backgrounds. They've got a skill set which we're all envious of. There's no doubt. I would love to be good at football. Same as anybody who's got an affection for the game. But I've not. And they bring enjoyment. They bring excitement into people's lives. So why shouldn't they be able to be paid accordingly? Newcastle fans, would they resent Alan Shearer making more money if he kept playing for Newcastle? I don't think so.
Certainly not. Yeah.
So in the case of Mbappe, all that the players are doing is that they're effectively doing the same as you and I can do in our jobs. Is that if another university wants to come in for me, they can say, well, we'll make you an offer, and I simply move from one job to another. Well, why should my existing employer get paid because if I prove to be, if I'm very good at what I do, which I'm not, I'm just a teacher. If I'm very good at what I'm doing, then there's nothing wrong with somebody wanting to pay me accordingly. Why should some of that money go to my previous employer? They've not necessarily been the reason why I've developed. So I don't have an issue with players running down their contracts because treating them like commodities, and that's what we do. And you see the outrage from some fans, where how dare he stay to the end of his contract? If I said to a fan, if you've got a 3-year contract where you work and you stay for that 3-year contract, what have you done wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like anyone, isn't it? They have to look after themselves. So, and before, when you were talking about the way footballers are targeted sometimes, I remember in COVID as well, where all of a sudden everyone was, I think it might have even come from a politician.
It did.
It was saying, why are the footballers not paying money towards things? And then Jordan Henderson came out and he said, well, we actually are. And then this is what we've been doing. And this is the money we've been putting in. So that's still very much they're an easy target, aren't they, in some ways?
Yeah, they're a very easy target, and they are scapegoated, especially by politicians when the fingers are pointed at them. It wasn't footballers who arranged for PPE contracts for their mates at vastly inflated prices. It wasn't footballers who were responsible for people dying in care homes whose families couldn't see them. I'm quite privileged in that I teach football I teach people in the football industry, and what does strike me all the time, I can be sitting at lunch and I won't say a word because I'll just be listening in. Is they are very passionate about their industry. If you hear two football managers talking tactics in a private meeting, as I've had the privilege of doing, you realise that actually we know nothing about football.
Yeah,
we know they will be able to discuss things from a tactical, a technical, a physical, a mental, a performance level that we've got no concept of. And then when they go before the cameras, it's they give the stock answers. Yeah. They're extremely good at what they do, and the politicization of football, because if England get to a World Cup final or something like that, you can guarantee the politicians will be there at that final, having schlepped up the free tickets. It won't be the regular Joes like you and I.
I remember going to a talk-in with Rafa Benitez for the Times just before I left Newcastle to come to Australia, and just what you've just said there about how clever they are. He was talking in intricate detail about tactics that he'd done in a game against Crystal Palace. And he was explaining it, and then he asked the crowd if they knew what he'd done, and someone got it right in the front row. And Rafa was like, "That's exactly what I did." And that guy, you could see that guy's head get bigger and bigger. But they are so intelligent, and we've found that, I think, Bobby, haven't we, with Eddie Howe since he's come in? In his press conferences, he says that he says the stock things, but you can see how clever he is, can't you, as well, and how hard he works.
Yeah. I mean, to get UEFA badges is really difficult.
Yeah.
So coming on to Newcastle then, Swiss Ramble is an account that you'll be well aware of, and
he's the other Kieran. Yeah, I know Kieran. Yeah,
he does absolutely fantastic breakdowns, easily digestible. So he did a thread about Newcastle and financial fair play just after the takeover. He thought that he estimated, this was before January, but he estimated that Newcastle could spend 200 million. They had about 200 million to play with. But then really that goes up to 600 million. So that could really be 600 million if we wanted to in one summer, with contracts of £300,000 a week. Are these headline figures, are these kind of what Newcastle fans should be focusing on at the moment, or should we not be thinking about that? But should Newcastle fans be worrying about being restricted by financial fair play?
I don't think so. I know Mike Ashley is sort of the Voldemort of Newcastle. But the legacy that he created was that during the period of ownership, Newcastle made an overall profit, and from an FFP point of view, when he left, I think I've estimated that they were plus £100 million, whereas the limit is minus 105. So certainly that there is the ability, there is the scope to spend significant monies. Now, everybody knows in football it's a talent industry. Normally, the clubs that pay the biggest wages tend to get the best. It's a short career, and you follow the money. So they are in a strong position. Do they have to spend all of that money at once? I personally wouldn't recommend it, because if we take a look at Manchester City when they first were in receipt of those additional monies, I think it's fair to say that they got the trousers taken down on quite a few occasions. Robinho, Joe, Adebayor. There were players who were coming there purely for the money. Whereas now, if you look at players who come to Manchester City, they know that they're going to be well paid, but they're also going to be coached by Guardiola. Which, if I was working in that profession, I would love to be in that position. So that's a driver as well. Certainly, Newcastle have got far more flexibility than they had under the Mike Ashley model, but the money has got to be well spent rather than just spent. There's loads of articles in the press this week, sort of why articles. Why are Manchester United not winning things? Well, Manchester United went 25 years without winning without winning the top division. They went from 68 to 93. There's no reason why they should be winning things, but there is a bit of a love-in with Manchester United and in the press, as if they should. They're complaining about finishing 6th in the Premier League. I'm going, well, I'd probably accept that. I suspect you'd probably accept that as well. Why should we feel sorry for them whining because they're only in the Europa League next season? So the behaviour of cheerleaders is pretty frustrating. But Newcastle fans, I think they've got nothing to worry about. The capacity to spend the money is there. I think the noises that we've been seeing coming from Eddie Howe have been, there's no reason why we should spend it, and he's saying the right things, because the last thing you want to be seen doing is waving $100 bills around all the time, because you'll have a lot of friends. As Mike Tyson used to say, he had a friend for every dollar he earned in boxing, and things didn't end up well there. So spend it well, have a strategy. And strategies take years rather than months to implement, and be patient, and the rewards will come.
So is that, you sort of answered my question a little bit with the fact that Eddie Howe is talking about we're restricted by FFP. Is it more a negotiation tactic or what have you? And we're hearing the press, particularly like Luke Edwards, saying Newcastle have got a max of £60 million to spend. Is that just all, a tactic to say, all right, we don't have the $600 million, we're not going to blow it all away, as you said? Or so you're saying that Newcastle fans have nothing to worry about?
Yeah. Could Newcastle spend hundreds of millions this summer? Yes. Will they? Probably not, because you in what you want is evolution rather than revolution, because. If you sign half a dozen Galacticos, it doesn't mean that they can play together. One of the things I think we are seeing more and more in terms of the analytical approach to football, the sports science approach, is that it's all about relationships on the pitch, and you've got to have players who are compatible with one another. And you do that over a period of time. You sign 6 or 7 players who are on massive transfer fees and massive wages. Doesn't mean that they can interact, because it might be that they've all got a right foot, or they've all got a left foot, or they all prefer to do this, and they all fade at 70 minutes. And you need a blend, and you can only really achieve that over a period of time. So therefore, securing a technical director, director of football, I think is one of the first things that you need to do.
And this is something that Eddie Howe's talked about in January, was getting players with the right character. And I have to say, Dan Burn, thanks very much for him. He has been absolutely colossal for us. And he was in good form for Brighton before he signed for us. But 13 million seems a snip for him.
I think actually it's a fair price for everybody concerned. This isn't sour grapes. He was probably at the start of the season our fourth choice centre half. And then injuries, suspensions came in, and he put in some blinding performances for us. He's been, Dan's been with the club, I think, 3 or 4 years now, and he was always a good squad player. We were playing him as a wing back, which he doesn't look like a wing back, but he's
6'8".
He's hugely underrated.
Yeah.
He scored the winning goal against Manchester City when we beat them last season, and that was one of the greatest moments I've had. And everybody loves him. So he's first of all he's a great guy. He was in the best form of his career when he left. He's 29. We got a good fee for him for a 29-year-old centre half. It was a chance for him to go home, a chance for him to be with his boyhood club. I think sometimes the stars are in alignment, and you will not find any resentment from Brighton fans about him going there. We fully understand the reason. So I think all the parties conducted themselves really well, and that's good to see, because sometimes when people come in with sort of the loads of money approach that perhaps you might associate with clubs such as Chelsea, it doesn't go down particularly well. I know a lot of Newcastle fans on social media that the vast majority of them are really good. There's a few idiots, but then there's a few idiots at Brighton. There's a few idiots at Liverpool. There's a few idiots at Crystal Palace. There's a few idiots at Manchester United. The vast majority of fans aren't.
Just before we move on I just want to talk about Mike Ashley for a minute again. So like you were saying, Newcastle made the 4th highest profits over the last 10 years of 94 million when Mike Ashley was there. But he invested nothing of his own money, and he put barely anything into any of the infrastructure. There was no commercial growth. Obviously, we had 2 relegations, and there was no ambition at the club beyond staying in the Premier League. So you've already talked a bit about his legacy financially, and like you said, it's not popular to praise Mike Ashley or to give him any credit among Newcastle fans. Do you think that the way that Newcastle were under Ashley for that period of time, do you think he deserves credit for what he did with the finances? And do you think it's kind of come at the expense of the ambition, or do you think he could have kind of done it a little bit differently? What's your thoughts on that?
He inherited a mess, and he turned that mess around. And I don't think he was given credit for that. Or if it was, it's become very begrudging. I think I was one of the first people to put out the infrastructure spend during his reign, and it was poor. But that is textbook Ashley. That's the way he runs his businesses. I think he would defend himself by saying that in order to take Newcastle United to the next level, so let's say the next level is competing for European places, would involve a very significant spend, and he wasn't willing to do that. Now, is that a lack of ambition, or is he also saying, well, hold on, show me how many trophies Newcastle won in the 40 or 50 years prior to me coming there? So I think you've got to have a measured analysis. He certainly didn't help himself at times. He was certainly not. I would not classify him as a good owner, but at the same time, is he the worst owner in the history of the Premier League? No, he's not, because he did lend the club money interest free, whereas we've got other club owners who are taking money out as in terms of executive pay and interest charges and so on. I think he became a toxic brand in his own right, in perhaps a similar way that I'm not politically interested in many things, but we've got a prime minister who has now become toxic. He might even say policies which should be popular, but because he's saying them. So in terms of the commercial, I think Newcastle could have been more successful commercially, without doubt, for reasons that nobody can really fathom out. He didn't seem particularly bothered by that. I think perhaps owning the nature of the shops that he does, Sports Direct, where everything is pared down to the bone in terms of costs, that investing in a marketing and commercial strategy seemed to be one of the areas where he was prepared to save £1 in wages and lose £10 in terms of additional income, and that wasn't necessarily well thought out. But I would equally point out that he is a billionaire and I am a teacher. So who am I to tell people how to behave?
You keep putting yourself down as a teacher. You called yourself just a teacher earlier. If I called my wife that, I'd end up with 2 black eyes. Just a teacher.
Well, I love teaching. For me it is a calling, but I get a lot of flack from fans of clubs when I say something which that the somewhat weaponized way that fan groups get motivated. So I try. My aim is to be objective, neutral, and analytical. And sometimes that means that you will put out data that people don't want to see. And the first reaction is, well, you would say that those that can do, those that can't teach. So I wear it as a badge of honor. But
after COVID lockdowns and homeschooling, my appreciation for teachers is through the roof. I can tell you that right now.
You've probably got an agenda against every club, have you? Or you have had an agenda at some point or another?
I think to be fair, there are some clubs who realise that what I try to do, and I genuinely do not try to set myself up as one of the good guys, but I genuinely believe that every fan of every club is equal, and just because you support Newcastle or Hartlepool doesn't mean that you're a better or a worse fan. It means that you are a fan of your local club, and that's that tie that you have. You don't support Newcastle United for glory, do you? It is
no.
It is a love affair, it's not pleasant at times, because I make the mistake of some. I've got quite a big social media presence these days. And if somebody says something, the worst thing that somebody can do to me is they say, have you seen what they've been saying about you on such and such message board? And what I should do is just walk away.
Yeah.
But you think,
I'm interested.
Jesus Christ. So sometimes sometimes criticism goes along with the gig, and what I will try to do is to engage with people, which they don't actually want. People don't want engagement these days, and provided it's agreeing to disagree, that's fine. When it turns into death threats, which I have had, that's not pleasant, and having been on the receiving end of that, I would also say to fans of clubs, Mike Ashley say he's not the best owner, not the worst owner. Don't go down that route. He doesn't. For all his faults, he does not deserve death threats.
And that's the bad side of social media, isn't it?
It's
very, very toxic at times. I saw you were tweeting about Stenhousemuir earlier and some of the Scottish clubs. So hopefully you haven't done anything to upset their fan base.
No, they're absolutely made up. Not many people write about Stenhousemuir, and as far as I'm concerned, it's what I do is a hobby, and I'm probably even more determined these days to not abandon the likes of Stenhousemuir or I've been going on today about Grimsby Town, because their fans are being ripped off going to the playoff finals to get into the EFL next season.
Just going back to Newcastle for a minute. So Newcastle are in the process of organising some sponsorship deals, probably with Saudi companies. We know that the temporary ban on owner-related companies sponsoring has been taken away now. That was something the Premier League put in. but the deals still have to be at fair market value for the sponsorship deals. Who decides what is fair value, and can Newcastle go in and start getting what Man City are getting or what Spurs are getting, or do we have to aim lower, sort of Everton, West Ham level at this stage?
I think it's got to be incremental. Manchester City and Manchester United and Chelsea, they do have big global fan bases. They are able to command high prices for exhibition matches pre-season, and they have their shirts sold around the world. Now Newcastle is coming. Newcastle is a big club domestically. It doesn't have that same footprint on a global basis, and I think that we just have to be realistic. At the same time, if we take a look at things such as arm advertising, shirt sleeve advertising, the going rate is around about £1 million. I was talking to somebody in a commercial department who says Newcastle are looking for 7 to 8, which will be high, but it's still a third of what Chelsea and Manchester United are going. So I think they are in a position to step up, and that will be a positive. But Newcastle's commercial income is 27 million pounds. It's a tenth of that of Manchester City. They're not going to bridge that gap in 2 or 3 years. It's going to take a decade or more to build up the profile.
Yeah, I was looking at through the Swiss Ramble thread as well about Newcastle have got about 5 times less shirt sponsorship than Spurs. I think it was 10 times less than Man United. So I'd kind of wondered if sort of targeting Spurs, which is pretty much where Newcastle were when Mike Ashley came, we were on a par with Spurs, whether that's realistic towards Spurs and Arsenal over the next kind of 5-6 years maybe. I think Manchester United and Liverpool are just behemoths, aren't they? Huge global brands, which I'm not sure we'll get near. But do you think targeting Spurs, Arsenal over that period is realistic?
I agree. I wrote I used to have a blog. Remember when blogs used to be a thing? Yeah, I remember blogs.
You're showing your age, Kieran.
I know. Tell me about it. So I wrote a blog article probably about 4 or 5 years ago when it was still just about a trendy thing to do, where I actually compared Newcastle and Spurs and said, well, these two clubs have gone in different directions in the sense that, to give credit to the Spurs owners, what they have done is that they've tried to grow revenues through expansion. They've been rewarded for that. They are now competing in the Champions League, not every year, but on a regular enough basis to make a difference. And that becomes a virtuous circle. And the more that you appear in the Champions League, the more eyeballs you generate, commercial sponsors and commercial partners like eyeballs.
And a couple of the other Premier League clubs that have been sort of making a few waves with financial fair play lately. One is Aston Villa, who seem to this summer to be spending freely, and they seem to have been doing that for a few years now. How are they doing that? And is that what Everton did over the last 5 years or so that's landed them in trouble?
Well, Aston Villa bought Jack Grealish for nothing and sold him for £100 million. So that gives you an awful lot of wiggle room. And remember that if you sign a player for £30 million on a 5-year contract, the cost is only £6 million a year in the account through amortization. So football, I think it distorts things when you sell players for huge fees, especially if those players have come through the ranks. And that does give you a lot of room for manoeuvre, and that's what Aston Villa have done. In the case of Everton, I think the jury's perhaps a bit more out. Everton have lost £372 million in the last 3 years. You can reduce that significantly with bits and pieces, but they are claiming that they've had £170 million worth of COVID costs. Yeah, Crystal Palace, their results came out yesterday. Crystal Palace are a small club, we all know that, but their COVID costs are 20, Villa's were 40, Leicester's were 50. There's been quite a few clubs in that broad 40 to 50 area, and then Everton 117.
Yeah.
I work in Liverpool. There's not, to my knowledge, been a special variant of COVID which just affected the
Scouse variant.
L4 zip code.
Yeah. Everton, Swiss Ramble had them at around 11 million in the red in terms of financial fair play. Is there going to be any repercussions to this, or are they going to get away with it?
I was at a Law in Sport conference just over a week ago. I think it's best to say that my lips are sealed on this.
Okay.
You can read into that whatever you want.
Yeah. So
their name certainly came up in conversation.
You said it before, football, it's about finding the loopholes. Is that just what it's become now in business with football? Is it just employing the smartest people to find loopholes in a system that you can get away with what you can get away with?
Not at every club. It depends upon the culture of the club. Ultimately it's all dictated by the very top, by the owners, by the board of directors who are effectively there to apply the wishes. If the culture of the owners is that we want to do it and we want to do it within the rules without bending the rules, then that's one thing. If the culture is we just want to win things and we don't care what we have to do in order to win things, then you're more likely to be utilising the more creative people within the professional ranks.
All right. I think the last thing we wanted to cover, Bobby, you wanted to ask about the news that we've had in the last day or so. Positive news for Newcastle.
Yeah, as a Brighton fan, I just wanted to get your take on Dan Ashworth. I think we're all very excited reading up on him and what he brings, but from a Brighton perspective, what's your thoughts on what we're getting and where you see him or where benefiting us?
I think he's fantastic at what he does. We headhunted him from England. I think he was getting a bit frustrated within the England setup in the sense that you've only got the tournaments in effectively every 2 years. He's extremely professional. He's extremely thorough. He will introduce a level of professionalism to the club, which will enhance it, provided the other people he's working with are equally professional. And he's a team player as well. So yeah, we're very sad to see him go. We can absolutely understand the reason why, because he's got a much bigger train set to play with in terms of the numbers, and yeah, that's just acknowledging where we are in the pecking order of football compared to Newcastle. You won't see results straight away. You won't be able to say in 6 weeks into the next season, Dan Ashworth made a huge difference, because with us it was an evolutionary thing. But the fact that Brighton had their highest finish in the club's history this season is testament to the good job that he did. And again, there'll be some Brighton fans whinging about it, but I think they're just being either naive or bitter or both, because he wasn't around from when the approach was made until the end of the season, and results were we did a good finish to the season, but he'd put in play part of the culture of the club in that the first team play in the same style as the under-23s, as the under-18s, as the under-16s. When you're looking for players, with particular characteristics, which we will help to identify, which goes into the culture and the style and the strategy of the play. And you start to see this production line come through. So, we sadly are probably going to lose 2 or 3 players this summer who have benefited from being part of that culture. So yeah, I think he will be an excellent addition to Newcastle United. He was with us for 3 to 4 years before we really started to see the results come through, because it is a case of making sure that the academy is working in the same way as the first team, and those academy players won't start challenging for 2 to 3 years in terms of the under-18s and the 23. So be patient. And I think you will find you've got an excellent person in place there, and I can understand why Newcastle targeted him. He was also targeted by Manchester United, by the way.
Okay.
But I think that was after Newcastle made their first approach, and he strikes me as a man of his word, in the sense that Newcastle came in first. I've given them a heads up. We know that he couldn't formally take the job, and he's that type of guy. So we think extremely highly of him, and I think he will be a good, if invisible, piece of the jigsaw.
This is music to our ears after we've had Lee Tranley basically doing everything for the last 10, 12 years. So that's fantastic for us. All right, Kieran, I think we've probably taken up enough of your Tuesday, and we'll let you go and get some lunch. We'll go to bed.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Kieran, for coming on. That's been really fantastic for us. That's going to give our listeners some really useful information on topical things that are going on for Newcastle at the moment. So thanks very much, and keep up the good work, and we'll speak to you soon. Cheers, Kieran.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Bobby.
Enjoy your winter.
Cheers.
Thank you.